I don't have a funny meme. Space Marines 2 wounds. Hello everyone and welcome back to Coffee Time. Welcome. I have a pink mug today. Enjoy. What mug are you drinking your coffee with? My name's Mikey and welcome to Hellstormwargaming. Today, before I get too far into it, I just want to say Steve, or @GrimPainting on Instagram, your wife Amanda says happy birthday, happy 40th birthday. Hope you have a great day. From me and all the team as well, happy birthday my dude. Congrats. So today we're going to have a little bit of a different video. We're going to have a gentlemanly discussion, or an open discussion regarding some, I'd like to say issues, I'd like to say drama that I've been seeing in the competitive 40k Facebook group. I'm quite active in this group because I do really like it. So today I wanted to talk about something that's kind of come up in that group by someone kind of raising it, and a couple of, let's say, issues that have come out to do with RAW versus RAI. RAW versus RAI, the age-old argument. And if you're new to Warhammer competitive or just rules lawyering in general, RAW is rules as written and RAI is rules as intended. That's the abbreviation. So the idea behind it is that rules as written is when you read a rule, and doesn't matter how you imagine it should play, you play it as it's written. So you follow the rule to the letter. If it says something, even if that rule sounds bizarre, you play it as that. Where rules as intended is where you kind of look at the rule, read how it's written, and kind of go, that doesn't quite make sense, but I think what they were trying to say is this, for example. And we see this argument is like an age-old argument, but I think it's just come up to light because of a GT that happened in the US last week. And it's quite interesting how these things can kind of come about, kind of come back into conversation. So I wanted to talk about the example that was given and kind of talk about what we should do about it. So rules as intended is usually how most people play the game, because the rules as written is how it should be intended, if that makes sense. A lot of rules in the game, kind of the way they're written, you can kind of see what they say. If you play it as written, it's also how it was intended because it's well written and it's easy to understand. Sometimes you don't always get that. What you do is you get strange wording or different type of wording which means something else, or is very similar to another way a rule plays, but because of the way it's written, you'd play it differently because that's how it's written down. But what we tend to see is an FAQ, or frequently asked questions, or an errata, or designer's notes now, which is the new 9th edition kind of like caveat, like explanation of what we mean. They say, here's loads of jargon that explains all the rule. Here's a 3-word bullet point that explains exactly what we mean, which doesn't actually mean what it says here, but this is what we mean. And this kind of helps with how rules are written and how they're supposed to be intended to be played. Now, we've seen this with a couple of rules where you'll have a rule that's written in one way, and then you'll have something else that has a similar rule that's written slightly differently. And as written, it plays completely differently. But then there's an FAQ or an errata on one of them that kind of shows how another one should be played. One good example for this is like Fight Last, that we've seen with the Armour of Rust, which is a relic by the Space Wolves. We've seen the Vexator Mask, which is a relic from the Drakari as well. One of them, I can't remember which order it was now, someone might be able to let me know in the comments. But essentially, one of them, I think it was the Vexator Mask, that said you must fight last, which is basically its ability. Choose a unit within 6, you must fight last. And the way that was played for a long time, because Drakari was the first one to get it, was that that unit had to fight last. It couldn't intervene. There was no ability that got around it. It was like, you fight last, so that's it. Whereas I think it was with Armour of Rust. Again, it could be another relic, but for this example, we'll just say it's Armour of Rust. That had an FAQ. It had the same ability, written slightly differently, but then it got FAQ'd to say, you fight last unless you use the counter-offensive stratagem, which is a stratagem for 2CB that lets you interrupt the sequence of fighting. So your opponent goes, then your opponent should go again, you interrupt for 2CP, and then you can fight. And what the Armour of Rust and that FAQ kind of made pathways for, or laid way for, any ability that is similar to the Armour of Rust. So it's choose a unit within 6, you fight last. Now you can use counter-offensive stratagem. So the Vexator Mask, I don't think it ever actually got an FAQ. There'll be a note there telling me I'm wrong because I'll have checked after I've recorded. But because we have the Armour of Rust, which is basically the same ability that says you can use the counter-offensive stratagem in this scenario, then everyone kind of accepts that the Vexator Mask, as intended, should have the same sort of use where you can use counter-offensive to kind of interrupt this order. Now, that's a really good example as how rules as intended is used in competitive play. And I am kind of focusing on competitive play because that's kind of where these rules really come to light and really start giving a bad name to competitive players, which I don't think is justified, because I think it's just a small minority that is either not nice people or are just new to the competitive scene and they think this is right, where really a lot of people, a lot of the very top players won't do this. Obviously, there's going to be some exceptions. Welcome to the world. It's not just Warhammer. Welcome to the world. People aren't always nice. But in most, like 99% of cases, like this sort of rules interaction won't be used in a way that could be seen to be like, you're kind of pushing your luck there, mate. It doesn't work like that. If you have something broken, like, for example, Richard Siegler took the Iron Hands Leviathan to the LVO. Is he going against rules as intended or rules as written? Not really. It's just as written and intended. It just so happened to be really, really good. That's kind of different to what I'm talking about today. I'm talking about when you've got a grey area in a list or a format or a wording of a particular rule, and you kind of go, well, if you read it this way, then I can do this, which is kind of like what we shouldn't do and what we should avoid to do. So for the example, I'm not going to give the specific example, but I'm going to give a example very, very close to it. In 8th edition, you had a move with just a move. Didn't matter what type of move it was. If you moved, you counted as moving, okay? And for something like an Ultramarines army with their tactical doctrine benefit, they essentially, when they move from turn 2 and turn 3, they count as remaining stationary for all rules purposes. So for example, they can shoot their rapid fire weapons twice, ignore the movement penalty, because essentially when you go to the shooting phase you haven't moved. And it's a really strong ability. And Ultramarines also come with a chapter tactic known as the Codex Discipline, I think it's called, where if they fall out of combat they can shoot at other units still, albeit at a -1. Now this is a really strong chapter tactic, and their tactical doctrine benefit is actually really strong as well. However, the way it's worded, people are kind of, a couple of people have picked up on this, and I think it was used at the GT in particular, this type of example, and not the exact one, but where, for example, if I had a unit that fell back, in 9th edition, that unit has technically fallen back. So it made a fallback move. So for all rules purposes, that unit has made a fallback move. However, their tactical doctrine benefit says when they come to the shooting phase, they shoot as if they'd remain stationary. Now, the way people are reading this was that if they made a fallback move, they actually remain stationary, because the rule says that they have remained stationary. And if they remain stationary, they haven't made a fallback move, which means they can still shoot. Now, this is very complex, and it sounds like it's very baffling, and that's because it is. And it's because people are reading it in a way that benefits their own army, or benefits an ability to their own personal gain, but not in the way that the army should benefit, for example. Quick editor's note, in 8th edition, if you move in, it didn't matter if you moved or anything. Like, if you remain stationary, it just means, as you would think, it means it didn't move. Whereas now in 9th edition, you have like remain stationary is like a type of movement, even though you're technically not moving, and it comes with its own caveats now. Whereas when these stratagems and when these abilities were written, remain stationary just meant it didn't move. So like, because they've added this now type of ability, I don't know what you call it, like, it's a type of move, but the type of move means you didn't move, if that makes sense. And that's kind of like where things start getting weird, because it's like, for all rules purposes, it stood still, and stood still means it didn't do anything. It means this wording now, whereas before it just meant you shoot as if you didn't move, but you still fall out of combat. But now it means you didn't perform a fallback move, and that's what people are trying to say. The reason that I can say this is because if you are playing a pure Ultramarines army, your chapter tactic is fall back and shoot at -1. Now, with the tactical doctrine, if they fall back and then counted as remain stationary, then the chapter tactic doesn't work at all, because if they fall back and can shoot, but if they always count as remaining stationary, why would they need the chapter tactic that says they can fall back and shoot at -1? Now that doesn't really make sense, and this is where you can kind of see where rules as intended and rules as written is very different. As written, I can totally see why people would come to that presumption, but also they're kind of looking at only half the wording that they've seen to kind of benefit themselves for that rule. So what you're basically saying is if I always count as remaining stationary, then I can always fall back and shoot with no minus because I've stood still, technically. And the same can be said for like Tau, for example. They have an ability called in Moncar, everything counts as remaining stationary, so everything can fall back and then shoot everything as normal, which is just not right. It's not how it's supposed to be played. Ultramarines just have a useless chapter tactic and nothing else makes sense. Like, the problem is again, it's kind of like looking at this grey area, and what you're supposed to do with the grey area is not jump into it and be like, yeah, this is how it works. You're supposed to dance around it and learn from it and watch it and not use it in a negative way. Obviously, falling back and then counting to remaining stationary is not right, and it's not as the rules are written, or what it is how the rules are written, but also not how they are intended. Because rules is written, and I think this is brought up by Falcon from 40k Stat Center, shout out to them because they're legends, that even though you have fallen back, you've made a fallback move. For all rules purposes as well, you count as remaining stationary, but nothing says that you've actually not fallen back. So now you have both fallen back and remained stationary at the same time. So can you shoot or not? Let me know in the comments. Obviously that's a really kind of here's a grey area, so here's more grey area, to kind of argue the grey area, so the grey blobs are just fighting each other and not really knowing who's going to win. But obviously it doesn't really make sense. If you fall back, even if you count as remaining stationary, you've still fallen back. And I think that's what people need to realise, that I don't think, now this is a hot take and you might not agree with it, and that's okay, but I don't think that taking rules as written as 100% factual and never considering rules as intended is the right way to go about things. Because what it does is it exploits the rules in a way that doesn't really look at how the rules are supposed to play. And I think that's what we should all do as players, as casual players, narrative players, and as competitive players. You know, I think we should all look at the rules and look how they are supposed to play and what makes the most sense, and play them in that way. Because there's nothing worse than winning a game but your opponent having a sour taste in his mouth because you did something against them which is clearly not right. Like, everyone can have a sour game because my army killed your army turn 1, fair and square. But that's the thing, it's fair and square. When you've got people who are using the rules and bending them to their own advantage, because it is slightly misworded or just worded in a strange way that someone who doesn't play competitive so much might not kind of tick all these boxes. They might not make all these connections. Like I can say, oh yeah, well you've remained stationary, but you've also fallen back, so you can't shoot. Like, someone might not be able to pick that up, and I've had a few days to kind of think about it and analyze it. But when you can kind of in a tournament be like, oh yeah, because of this rule, then this is this is how it works now. And then you go, oh no, that's not how it works. And they go, oh yeah, mate, this is how it works, isn't it? And you go, yeah, that's how it works, yeah. Because he's playing his own game, he doesn't care. It just creates a really feel bad situation, which I don't want you to promote. I wouldn't promote it myself. I'd only promote broken Space Marines. I wouldn't promote exploited rules that are clearly wrong. Not on purpose anyway, which is kind of what I want to say today. I don't think it's right to exploit rules as written against rules as intended. You can clearly see how you can make these connections, but also you should be looking at the rules and trying to say, I don't think this is right, let's get this fixed. In video games, if there's a glitch or something like that, then people will use it. But what happens is that glitch gets fixed. And it usually gets fixed quite quickly, especially if it's a popular game. Whereas in Wargaming, we have such a vast rule set that can't be tested as easily as a video game. There is many combinations. There's many writers all working on the same thing. And yeah, you could blame GW for this and say that their rules writing isn't consistent, and I can't exactly argue with that. I love Games Workshop, I love the rules that they put out, I love the models that they put out, but I can't openly say that the rules writing is perfectly consistent, because I don't think it is. But I think that's just the nature of the beast that we have such a massive, vast game with 25 factions, with 10 units in each one, and each unit has special rules, and each weapon that you can give them has special rules. It is a very complex game. And so I don't think we'll ever get that perfect. Rules as written are rules as intended at the same time. I don't think we'll ever get that. Or if we do, fair play, hats off to Games Workshop and everyone involved, fair play to them. But sitting at the sideline and kind of watching on and seeing what people are doing in this game, you kind of have to just think, let's make the game great. Let's, don't be a dickhead. She's basically this the whole synopsis of this video. Don't be a dickhead when it comes to Warhammer, because we are playing. The thing is that most people will play Warhammer as an escape from something that they've got going on in their own life. And whether you can play competitive or narratively or casually or whatever, it doesn't really matter. The fact is that we're all having fun, and the reason we play the game is because we enjoy models, we enjoy playing games, obviously we enjoy winning, and we want to play tournaments and stuff like that. And what we should be doing as a community is promoting tournament play. We shouldn't be showing off how bad tournament play can be when you get that one guy who's got a grey area, he's got a bit of a finicky rule, and he goes, yeah, this is how it works, when it probably isn't. And again, you can't really blame them unless they're doing it on purpose. If they've read it and they've gone, I think this is how it works, then fair enough. But what you should be doing is kind of going, I've read it, this is how I think it works. I don't think it should work like this. So how can you work with that? So, I don't know. That's kind of like my thoughts on the whole situation. Maybe people didn't want it. You've got it now, so here you go. So since recording this video, Salty John from Frontline Gaming has actually done an article that's very similar, on the same vein of kind of like what I've spoken about. So if you want to read that, I'll leave a link in the description. Fair play to that guy. Awesome dude. And he writes great articles. And he has pretty good memes, so he's welcoming it with me. Well, there you go, guys. That's kind of what I wanted to talk about today. Again, I appreciate it's not as memey, not as funny, but I feel like this is kind of like a good message to promote that I felt like I wanted to get out there before it kind of got lost in the warp or it got too out of hand. I wanted to say to you guys at home that don't be a dickhead. And that's kind of all I want to put it today. We play tournaments and we play games because it's fun. And let's keep it that way. Whether you're playing for a $10,000, whether you're playing to win, whoever buys the next round, just play for fun, man, and have a great time. So thank you very much for joining me on Coffee Time. My name's Mikey. This has been Hellstormwargaming. Let me know what mug you've been drinking out of, because I want to hear about your mugs. Please subscribe if you can. That'd be fantastic. Otherwise, have a great day, and hopefully we'll catch you in the next one. Bye-bye now.